All right, welcome back to What the Frick podcast. Today I have on a special guest. This is actually Drea. We all know Drea, a good friend of the podcast, one of her best friends, but I am stealing him for the day. So this is CJ. Say hi, CJ.
Hey everyone, how's it going? Probably hold the mic up like she said to do. But hey everyone, how's it going?
There you go. So CJ, you are 26, correct?
I am.
And you are a single guy.
I am.
Living in the Phoenix, Scottsdale area.
Yep.
So the other day I was having some issues and was talking to CJ about the dating life. And an hour later I was like, you know what? It'd be good to have CJ on the podcast and just get the male perspective on kind of just dating in general. But wanted to just start off by asking you like your general ideas, your general thoughts on dating in this generation, and just like the most, or we'll start there, just like your general thoughts, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, I was gonna say we could probably do a whole episode off just that first topic, but I think it's really interesting. You know, I come from like a multiple divorce family situation, so obviously that gives you a skewed perspective. And you know, my grandparents were also married for over 60 years, so kind of beginning dating life and career was always interesting. But I think like right now and where things are at, it's a very like interesting landscape, obviously, as I'm sure you could imagine. And it's really challenging, like for a lot of people, for a lot of different reasons. I think it's such a myriad of different issues with people. Sometimes it's hard to like really bite down and say, hey, this is a struggle it seems like we're all facing, because it's truly so varied. But I think it's kind of like jobs right now. It's just a weird market out there. It's hard, you know, like it feels like sometimes you're almost interviewing, you know, for the dating scene and trying to see who might be a good prospect and stuff like that. So it's not bad. It's not great. I think it's just kind of an interesting one.
What do you think is like the hardest thing right now about dating, or something that you've noticed that's like more of a challenge for yourself with finding women that you like?
That's a good question, actually. I think the biggest piece for me is like expectation versus reality is a big part as well. I think you've maybe probably seen some of those TikToks where it's like, of course, you wouldn't go on a podcast without talking about TikToks, but where people are talking about like the lists for men and women of like, okay, so you can't be close with your mom, you can't do this, you can't do that, or on the inverse, you know, you can't have male friends. It's this kind of list of things that are expectation wise, you've got to check these boxes, versus the reality that like in any healthy relationship, any healthy talking dating stage, very, very rarely will you find one person who will tick every single one of your boxes 100%. And I think it's a world where people are looking for a Michael Jordan every single day, if you will. Mm-hmm. And there's only ever going to be one Michael Jordan, right? So setting the expectation of finding happiness, but realizing like you're going to have to come to a compromise and compromise on some things as well.
Do you feel like women are interviewing you with this checklist in their head, and
Absolutely.
You can kind of see like, oh, I'm either not checking it or I am, and they might not talk to me after?
Absolutely. And it's funny because when you use like a dating app, like I'm sure a lot of people are on dating apps nowadays, I am too, you almost kind of disqualify yourself from an interview, right? Mm-hmm. So you'll see these prompts and it's like, I'll fall for you if you have a mustache. I'm like, oh, well,
definitely not.
You know, like I don't have a mustache, or like if you can squat more than me, or if you have tattoos, right? So as you're going through these dating apps, a lot of the time you feel like you're getting interviewed and you're not even really getting a chance to showcase your skills. And sometimes, I mean, I might speak for myself, I've disqualified myself from interviews by saying, oh, I don't have any tattoos. Oh, I just shaved my mustache, whatever it might be, you know?
That's crazy, because I never thought of it like that. But people are very specific, and I know for a lot of women, like height is a big thing, or the tattoo thing is big too. I see a lot of that, and I'm like, I would be almost more likely to disqualify you if you had too many tattoos than wanting someone that had a bunch. But that's interesting. Do you have a certain checklist that you have, or are you more like, let's just see what this person is like?
I'm very much a let's see what this person is like kind of person. Like, there are definitely boxes I'd like to have ticked, right? Like, number one, loyalty, as you might imagine, is like an unnegotiable for me. Can't be any questions of that. Trust has got to be there, like those kind of typical intangibles. But I like to give everyone a fair chance. You know, I don't think it's fair to disqualify anyone based off of your objective assessment of who they are until you get a chance to get FaceTime with them. And, you know, so many people do the surface level, you know, let's rizz somebody up, get a conversation going, and then you ghost or have a situationship and it falls apart. I think a lot of people don't spend the time to really go through their own checklists and assure that it's realistic, which I like to think I've done a pretty good job of, but I guess I'm the only person who can really judge that.
Yeah, I mean, I know I've been with people who had everything in my checklist, and then I met them in real life and I felt absolutely zero connection. I'm like, this is really disappointing. So you kind of can't go off of a checklist. Like, you have to meet someone and be like, you might just vibe with someone that you had no idea you would like.
For sure. And the opposites attract thing is always difficult too, because you might have this checklist and think of things like, this is exactly what I'm looking for, this is what I need, and then you will sometimes surprise yourself by having someone who could be the complete inverse of that, and it be more than you could have imagined you'd find with the checklist. But you never really can tell.
Do you think it's harder dating like post-college, post-high school now in like our adult lives than it was back then, even though back then we were kind of like, we don't know what's going on, but I think it's harder. So what do you think?
I think it's harder, and I think like something even before that, when we talk about like dating, right? I think dating is a word that is so, the word that people use now, obviously, but it's so inaccurate. I think it's a really unfortunate way to like generalize relationships between people now, because dating when my grandparents were around was you were going on multiple dates, right? Like you were assessing your vibe for each other. You know, my grandparents, their first ever date was a Detroit Tigers game back in the, like, God, who knows how long ago, way before I was around, but
Cute.
They went on a lot of dates, right? And I think nowadays, most of the time, you're probably going on 1, 2, maybe 3 dates, and it's kind of like there's a timeline and like a shot clock, right? I'm going to stick with this person and try to talk to them more, or I've kind of lost interest, I'm going to go back to the drawing board. And I think it's definitely more difficult now, right? We have access to so much more with dating apps. That wasn't a thing back then. We obviously live in the Valley, which is, you know, saturated with tens of thousands of people in our age group. So it's kind of created this perfect storm of, especially where we are and in our age group, it's increasingly difficult. Yeah. And there's just areas all across the board that make it even harder than it used to be.
I always find it weird when like I match with someone and then they either never message me, or if I message them first because I'm feeling crazy, they'll just like never message back, and it's like, well, what's the point? And it's because it's like so saturated, like you said, and like they might have another option here, they just might be busy, but it's like there's too much for us to like have options for, where it's not like as nailed down with like your grandparents. They're probably like walk in to knock on her door, or like maybe there's a telephone, I don't know. Yeah. But it's like there's no texting, there's no dating apps, and it's like a lot harder for people like us to find someone, because it's just like, all right, well, just swipe the next person.
Yeah, and I mean, this might be a hot take, like drop in the comments if you think this is a hot take, but like I think the whole concept of like having options, right? And obviously it sounds weird having options as it's a bad thing, because it's not. But I think it's a generational entitlement thing, especially in our age group, of people who think the grass could always be greener, and it ties back into the expectations versus reality thing. Like, let's call it what it is. A lot of people nowadays have their rosters. Yep. 2, 3, 4, hopefully if it goes beyond that, you got a whole team. But, you know, a lot of people have this entitlement to think that they can really focus on splitting their attention, splitting their affection amongst other people, and it just is so unfair, especially when a lot of people aren't truthful about it or honest about it. And if that is the case, if you communicate that up front to somebody, you'll be able to receive the message of, I'm cool with that, let's do that, or not. Eventually, a lot of the times it, you know, gets to that end stage. You're like, oh, okay, you're entertaining 3 other people at the same time as me. Why do you feel like that's acceptable? Like,
yeah. I think a lot of women probably don't want to ask a guy like, oh, are you seeing multiple people, out of fear that they'll either say yes, or they'll just like lie or dump them. Mm-hmm. And what you said the other day, like women have their own rosters too. But I think it's crazy. Like, how do people have time to date not only just one person, but like, are you not going to the gym? Are you not, do you not have hobbies, like friends, personal time? Like, how do you like go out every night? Like, that just sounds insane to me. So I honestly applaud those people because they have a skill I'll never have, which is patience.
Much better multitasker, much more patient than I am. Couldn't be me.
Well, to switch it up a little bit, when it comes to dating, I think a lot of women have a standard of like, I'll only go to a certain place. Like some girls are like, I won't do drinks, I want dinner. Or some girls like Drea is a lot more relaxed. She just wants to go on like a coffee date, you know, something more. I'm like that too. I'd rather just see if I like you. But when it comes to you, like what's your go-to like date for a first date?
That's a tough one. I can see both sides of the coin, right? I think you're seeing a lot more nowadays of women in the dating scene saying things like dinner is the easy way out. Drinks are the easy way out. And I can definitely see that being a case and being valid. But it's also on the inverse of like, okay, let's say we're going to go on a hike or something outdoors, a different activity that also creates a little bit of a less intimate environment depending on what you're trying to achieve with that date. Truth be told, I haven't been on like a formal date in a little while, so I'm probably a little rusty on what I would do. But like something for me is I love sushi. I'm a huge sushi nut. Like I will eat rolls on rolls on rolls. I love a sushi date because I think it's a good way to not be at like a really stuffy, quiet restaurant where the lights are dim. You're having a lot of like waiter interactions and it's just sometimes kind of weird. But it's a good way to like be interactive for a meal in a weird way, you know, like
women love sushi.
Yeah. I mean, how could you not, right? Maybe you're somebody who does drink and you're saying, hey, let's take sake bombs, right? It's something fun. You get to test someone's taste because sushi can be so spicy. It can be sweet. It can be raw cooked. You really get a feel for this person's palate, right? So I think for me, like a sushi date is really comfortable because I like to eat. I like to eat sushi, and it's a little bit less pressurized than a formal steak dinner or just going to grab drinks, you know, which can be good, can be bad. You know, what do you think?
I mean, I prefer the more like chill date of like just getting a drink because if I don't like them, I don't want to have a whole dinner with them. If I have one drink, then I don't like them. I can be like, oh, I got to go home. I got to get up early. But if I do like them, then I can just have another drink and continue that and then set like a more formal date afterward. But a lot of women are like in that mindset of, oh, I should be treated. And I'm like, yeah, you should. But also it's like, it's a financial obligation to the guy because most guys are hopefully going to pay for a first date.
Should be.
And
pay for the first date.
If they're not, that's like a whole other issue. But yeah, I don't know. Have you experienced women like being weird about like where you take them on a first date or saying like, I don't want that, I want this, or being like more picky?
I don't think so on a first date. I see the point about drinks though, and like I would even raise it as another point about something with our generation is like we grab a drink. Maybe we're not vibing, we're not having a good time, and you'd mention like, oh, hey, I got to go home. Like in that moment, and maybe this is just me, maybe I'm weird, I would rather you like right to my face be like, hey, really appreciate that drink, like great conversation. I'll be honest with you, like I don't feel like me and you would probably be a good fit. Like don't see the vibe between us working out, but I really do appreciate the evening. You know, I wish you the best in your search. And I think that is the issue that I've kind of experienced of wanting that.
Okay.
That honesty and transparency. I feel like nowadays a lot of people are afraid to hurt people's feelings. And
I mean, I am, yeah.
Yeah, and it's normal, right? No one wants to be negative and leave a bad taste in people's mouth, you know, inherently. But I guess I would say the issue I've had before is going through that first date, getting the good feedback. Oh, it was a great time. And then later on, I'm wondering what's the deal here? We went radio silence. I would much rather someone just be straight up. Hey, this was not my kind of vibe. You're not my kind of vibe. Me and you's not a thing. Throwing up the deuces. You know what I'm saying? It just would feel a lot more organic to me if you're honest than, you know, kind of lead on it. And guys do the same thing. To be truthful with you, you know this too. Guys will tell you this, that, and the third to make it seem all roses. And then down the line, it's like, okay, well, that was clearly cap. So I think it's just the honesty piece is what I've experienced the most.
Have you told a girl to her face like during a date, oh, I don't think this is going to go anywhere, but it was good to meet you. And like, obviously, you know, here's your drink and so on.
Again, I'll reiterate, I haven't been on a first date in a while, but I don't think I've been in that situation before necessarily. Okay. I try to be pretty particular with the people that I would take.
Good people.
I tried to. I find myself here single, so it couldn't be that great. But
same.
You know, it's that battle back and forth of, are you willing to jump off the plank and take a bit of a risk with someone, or are you checking those boxes? So when you think about a first date, it's those pros and cons of like, what do you have to lose versus are you going to try to start something up with somebody that won't machinate into anything? So I don't think I've been in a situation where I've had to do that, but I will say if I was, I would more likely than not be very honest with that person. And I would hope that anyone who would be in a conversation with me would too, and probably say that.
All right. Well, to play devil's advocate to that, I think a lot of reasons why women don't tell a guy to their face, like, I don't like you, is because they're worried they might not be a good guy. And a lot of guys don't handle rejection well. Like, you sound like you'd be like, oh my God, thank you so much, not wasting my time. But some guys have these egos and they just might start swearing at you. They might be like, well, I'm not paying for this. Like, they might almost get like aggressive in a way, where a lot of women just don't want to deal with that. So they'd rather, you know, save the formalities, go home, send the text, or even ghost, just to keep themselves safe.
For sure. And absolutely, that's 100% valid, right? Like, women have to deal with that concern in a way that men never will. And it's created, again, I think it ties again back into the entitlement thing. I think a lot of guys in our generation now have that level of entitlement to not only anyone, but to like a young woman. You know, I've even seen, again, I'm bringing up TikToks, of course, but I've even just saw a TikTok the other day of a dude who had a bad day with a woman, and he like followed her home and was freaking out and doing all this crazy nonsense. And there's no excuse for it. And it's just understanding that transparency and honesty on the front end is really difficult, and you have to keep that in consideration. But it's hopefully something that as people go through that dating cycle more and they experience it more, you can kind of gauge out as best as you can. Like, is this dude some crazy incel dude who's going to freak out on me if I tell him it's not a vibe? Or is this a man who's going to be comfortable with himself to be able to handle a no and respectfully still smile through it and say, hey, it's probably just not a good fit?
Yeah. It'd be nice if men were like that, but I will say if I don't like a guy, I usually just thank him. And if he can't tell from my own body language that I'm trying to go home,
that's a problem by itself.
It's like, oh, that's maybe not the best look for you. Mm-hmm. But going back to the checklist, are there like red flags you have when it comes to women, or deal breakers where you're like, if I see this, it's just like an automatic no versus like an automatic yes?
The whole red flag, green flag thing. I wonder when, like, I want to know when that started. You know, who was the first person to say like, oh, this person has red flags? I don't know. It's difficult with red flags, right? Because I feel like nowadays the dating scene is typically gone about one of two ways. It's either through dating apps, social media, or it's that who do you know that knows someone that says, oh, Shayna, you know, I got this guy for you, he's gonna love you. Mm-hmm. And I think when you look at examining red flags, the way that people do it on social media now is distorting the way that people are doing it in person, and kind of vice versa. Yeah. Right? Like, you can even ask Drea. Drea and I have gone through Hinge multiple times, sitting next to each other, and just scrolled through profiles together and been like, okay, what do you think about this person? What do you think about this person? And it seems like the vast majority of the time, either one of us can spot a red flag for one of us on some person's profile, right?
Right.
So for me, like, personally, red flags, I don't like to generalize until I get to meet someone face to face, shake their hand, have a chat. Over social media, sure. You know, there's certain things, like, for me, having the Instagram handle in the bio on Hinge, for example, is like a huge red flag for me, because it's like, you probably have your Instagram linked at the bottom. It's not always a very personal way to like garner someone's interest and get someone interested in you. But I wouldn't say like personally I have a ton of red flags. I feel like once I get to know somebody.
Yeah. What about then?
Well, yeah, that's another ball of wax, right? Like, red flag wise, I think it's just so tricky, man. Like, sometimes certain people have red flags that they disguise really well. The texting thing, right? I'm big on response time. I'm not asking you to be at my beck and call any moment of the day at all. But if we're going over a day, over 24 hours, and I've shot you a text, and I read your text, I didn't respond, right? Like, let's be honest with each other. Like, I feel like most people are using their phones. A lot of folks have Apple Watches, right? The chances of a text going to you and you not having any concept or knowledge of it is slimmer now than it probably ever has been.
Yeah.
So stuff like that, you can kind of read between the lines and how much nonsense are you willing to believe at one point. So it's just one of those weird ones. What about you?
So like communication.
Communication's huge. Because if they're not going to communicate while you're in the pre-marital phase, boyfriend-girlfriend phase, if you have, and this is the way I think now, I'm 26, I'm not old or anything, but now thinking down the line, if they can't communicate to me now, if we have 3 kids, a mortgage, a lot of responsibilities, 30 years down the line, how can I expect that, hey, this person will be a strong communicator? You know, that's the way I see it.
That's a good point. That's a big one for me too. Like someone that can communicate, and I don't like texting 24/7, but just checking in or saying like, oh, let's plan something and we'll talk when we see each other. And just people that are straightforward too, like not playing games, not being like around the bush about things. Like the guy I was just seeing had been dating him for over a month and was telling me that we're both single, and I'm like, okay, so that's not what your actions state, but people that are just straightforward, I think, is a big one.
It's tough. It's really frustrating, and it's like you just said. Like, thank you for stating the obvious. I'm aware I'm single and that you're single.
Yeah.
But it's just so weird. If and I'm not saying again like you need to be in touch with me all the time. I'm huge on FaceTiming. I will FaceTime anybody in my phone out of the random blue sky because I just like to talk. I'm not a huge texter either. And I think now you can send like voicemail or voicemail FaceTimes or FaceTime voicemails, whatever it is. If you're super busy, just let me know. I get it. We're all busy. But the lack of communication piece just makes it really difficult. And I'll say that was one thing I really identified that I was horrible at in my last relationship. I was a terrible communicator. Part of why it failed, and the biggest part probably of why it failed, was I didn't know how to communicate properly. You know, I kind of went into a shell when I didn't want to address things and recognize that level of honesty I wanted, I wasn't being honest with myself and wasn't communicating that to the partner I was with at the time. So it's all connected on the communication front.
Yeah. Well, it's good that you learned from that because now you know that that's something you have to do and they have to do.
100%.
Two-way street.
100%.
But when it comes to like our generation specifically, the whole situationship versus actual relationship thing, do you think there's like a timeline of how long you can be in a situationship for? Because everyone's in one at some point. Like you're not going to ask someone to be your girlfriend or boyfriend on like date 2. You're like a psychopath. But like how long do you think you can teeter that line? 'Cause I think men try to teeter that line for as long as they can.
I mean, yeah, like day 2 would be crazy. That's why I would typically ask them out on like day 3. No, I'm kidding. No, I think it's just one of them. Again, it's a communication piece. If you're getting into a situationship, why can't that be addressed up front? Right? You see again, and everyone's like looking for in a lot of the apps, looking for a long-term relationship, open to short. That small change of either your long-term, short-term, or both, I don't know if there's necessarily a time limit, but if that's something you're looking for, communicate that. First off, like in early dates, maybe I'm different. I would want to talk about what kind of things do you look for? Like, do you have a lot of stuff coming up in your life right now where you feel like you'd have space for a partner? Do you really feel comfortable with not having other options? Like, would you be open to being a little bit more exclusive and just talking to each other, right? So I think to kind of preempt having a timeline, setting those expectations up front, being transparent about what's really going on in your life and what you expect out of a partner that you may have will kind of prevent you having those timing issues, funnily enough. So I'd be kind of hard pressed to give you an exact timeline. But I think if you find yourself in a situationship, it's probably good to reassess and kind of backtrack in your mind. How did we get to this point, and how could I have avoided this confusion in the first place?
Well, first off, those are very mature questions that if you're asking someone, I think people are afraid to ask that because they're going to come off like they lost all the power, or I'm more in love with you than you are in love with me, and blah, blah, blah. But I also think there's like a time frame of like you have to figure out if you actually like someone, because I don't know until the third date usually if I actually like someone. Like it kind of takes me a minute to be like, okay, I like what they look like. Can I really connect with them? And I think that takes a few dates. But sometimes I feel like it can take even longer. It's like, do I actually want to be full on dating, exclusive with this person? But do you think guys kind of figure that out quicker? Like,
guys don't tend to figure a lot out, much faster than women have the ability to do. So I'd be pressed to say they do. I think, look, let's be honest. A lot of dudes in the dating world nowadays, they know what they're in for. They know what they're looking for. Most guys out there don't have the, hey, I'd be open to a short-term relationship. I'd be open to a long-term relationship. Most guys probably have a pretty darn good feel of what they're actually looking for. And I think by the time date 2 goes around, date 3 goes around, as we know in our generation with hookup culture, if you get past date 1 and there's been no hooking up, right? You get to date 2 and there's been no hooking up, and that guy's okay with it. He's not starting to ghost or pull away. There's no red flags that you can find. By date 3, to me, that'd be a pretty good signal that they're into more, there's more interest there than just trying to have that physical fulfillment, if you will. But if the foundation and the bedrock of that early dating experience for that person is physically oriented, it's not just grabbing a drink, but like, let's go to Patty's, like a bar or something like that out here and get hammered and go home together on the second date, then it changes the whole dynamic. Yeah. I think it's an issue that a lot of people don't get the chance to explore those things further because they muddy the waters early by giving people access to that more important piece of things early doors, if that made sense at all whatsoever.
No, it does. And I hate the fact that there's so much pressure with the hookup culture. It's like in high school, you would not have pressured your freshman girlfriend on like day 3 to be like doing that with you. But nowadays it's like, it's date 3. Like, what are we doing? It's like, right. I've probably hung out with you a total of 8 hours. Like, I barely know you, but right. It's like, they're probably gonna either leave, but that's like a sign like, okay, they're not into me. But then it's like, that's just kind of how people think. And it's stressful for me because I'm super weird about that stuff. And a lot of guys just won't stick around.
It's true, and I think it was something that, like, the last time me and you spoke, we touched on about the fact that that entitlement piece and that, like, physical connection piece oftentimes is the biggest draw for a lot of people. And not just men, but women, too, to the extent of if you are looking for a strictly physical connection with someone, you just want to do the hookup thing, be honest. And just be straightforward with someone. Like, if you just want to hook up, tell me that. And if I respond well to it and I'm interested, we can do it. And I'm sure, I mean, I haven't had this personal experience, but I'm sure there are people that have where you communicate to someone, let's just hook up. That's all I want to do. And if the woman or the man responds in that case with, yeah, I'm down, that's okay. Yeah. But a lot of men especially, but I think sometimes women too, disguise that true
most
desire.
Guys lie.
Most guys do, I think a lot of people disguise the real goal of trying to be physical by let's feel things out. Let's go on a couple of dates, see if it pans out happening that way, when in reality that's what they really want.
Yeah. Have you ever been personally stuck in a situationship that you were hoping was going to take the next step, but were kind of in that more frail state of mind of, well, they might not be there. Do I lose them? Mm-hmm. Or do I keep going in this state of mind that I'm not comfortable in?
100%. And it wasn't recent. It wasn't super long ago. It's been a little while. And I think that's part of what helped me get out of that situationship, like in one piece, to not be dramatic, but to like not be left with
relatable.
Like to not be left with a bunch of dating scars and be like marred by that experience was taking the time to actually reflect on what I wanted out of it, and giving each other the space and giving each other the opportunity to say, here's what's on the table. Here's where we're at. Here's where I am. Here's where I am. Coming out of this, where do we want to land? And not just kind of knee-jerk reactioning like, oh, let's just be friends. Oh, let's be more serious. I need a little bit of time to think about this. I think it's a huge issue nowadays that people feel that need and that pressure to give immediate responses to really profound changes in their life. And for me, in that situationship, whenever that was, not that long ago, really just giving myself the chance to like think and reflect on it, and kind of, you know, I'm a man of faith, have my conversations with big man upstairs and conversations with myself about where do I really want this to be, and then without a shadow of a doubt, 100% honestly communicating that to that person. And unfortunately, it resulted in me and that person not really having any kind of a relationship of any sense anymore. But I think at least hopefully we both walked away from it with the assuredness that you were honest, I was honest, and I didn't leave anything else on the table. Yeah. I told you where I was at. We were clearly on different pages, and it's unfortunate. I would have liked for it to machinate into something more, but parting ways respectfully and amicably.
Yeah, I think people struggle with that, and it's like you had to kind of stick up for yourself at some point. Like, you got to put your foot down and be like, this is what I want. If it's not what you want, then as sad as it might be, and as much as you might want to be like, I'll just stay, like, you're just going to end up way more jaded in the long run.
Yeah.
So
jaded is the truth. Like, it's a really good term. I like that you said jaded, because you're not on one side of the fence or the other, and it creates more issues down the line where you do feel on the one side like, I could probably go back into the dating scene, but that other side of that jade, if you will, is like, I've got these scars, I've got these previous experiences that more likely than not will permeate into that new experience. So you're absolutely right. I love that you said that.
All right. Well, switching gears from that beautiful TED Talk, I know you kind of mentioned one hot take earlier, but do you have any other hot takes? It could be something super generalized, specific, maybe double standards you've seen, but just anything that just comes to your mind.
I don't know if it's a hot take, more of a realization that I think dating can be and is a lot of times really overrated. And I say that obviously as a cynical single dude, as you can tell.
Yeah.
But like, I've been single for a while now, and even in my past couple situationships, as we've discussed, one thing I've really realized is you get lonely, as obviously you would know and understand. A lot of people get lonely, but filling that loneliness with genuine friendships and relationships and people that fill you with joy and excitement, it alleviates the loneliness. And I think a lot of people do default to romantic relationships, and you know, you're on Hinge late at night and you're just kind of scrolling through like, oh, this makes me feel a little better about how lonely I am. But filling your time and filling your energy with people who love you and care about you and want to spend time with you, a lot of the times take your mind off it. And when you are ready for that dating experience, I'm a believer, even firmlier now than I probably was at one point, that person will put themselves in front of you. The world works in mysterious ways. When that person is ready for you, and that person, whether you know them already and maybe it just hasn't gotten to that point or not, that person will show themselves, if you will, to you. And I think, again, that's a big realization I made kind of tail end of last year and definitely 2024, is unless it's something that I'm fiery, passionately in love about with somebody, focus on truly investing in my friendships and spending time with people that I'm like, I can't wait to see this person every week. There's a really close couple of mine, shout out Carlos and Shay, my people, who, you know, I've known the both of them for a while now, but we started getting close, really close last year. And the amount of excitement to spend time with people, and you know, Drea is another person too, as you know, Drea, that I'm like, holy shit, I get to, pardon my language, hang out with this person and be around these people. It anchors you where you don't feel that loneliness so more. So that's not a hot take, very longly spoken, of course, but like a realization, I guess.
No, that was beautiful. That just hit home because I used to be the same way. Like, I would use guys I was seeing or my boyfriend. If they couldn't hang out, if they were busy, I would get like upset.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm like, well, what am I going to do now? And so I really had to change my mindset over the past 2 years to be like, you have to be okay by yourself.
Yeah.
You have to be okay with just like talking to your family or your friends and focus on people that aren't going to leave if, like, you know, a breakup happens. Like, you're probably not going to dump one of your friends, hopefully.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not a hot take. I think that's beautiful, actually.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing. And then we'll end the episode with, usually on this podcast, it's kind of centered around telling personal stories.
Mm-hmm.
If you were telling a story to a friend over like chips and a marg type thing. Okay. So are there any personal stories, you know, centered around dating, people you've been with, could end greatly or sadly, whatever you're willing to share that you'd be willing to tell the people?
I'll leave y'all on a cautionary tale of trying to be slick. I was seeing someone very briefly at the beginning of last year and wasn't super deep into it. You know, had met, was like, okay, this is a vibe. And I'll leave some of the uglier details out of it, but keep it high level. Was going well with this person, was excited that this was someone new to me, someone who seemingly could be a good fit. And I felt hopefully that I was going to be in the same shoes. And come to find out, you know, as events transpired and things happened with this person, that this person had gone and done things actively with the goal in mind of pulling one over on me, of doing these things with the goal in mind of being like, oh, I'm going to get away with it. And it seems so elementary to just like kind of just not be a bad person and do that kind of stuff.
Right.
But it ties back into, I think, a greater theme for me that's critical is just truth and honesty about stuff, right? I think a lot of times people feel that entitlement again to be able to sneak around and be able to pull stuff off behind your back because early on the front end, they didn't tell you the truth. And they weren't honest with you about how they felt about you or about your talking and situationship phase. And I think that kind of experience for me really did hurt and did leave some scars, but I'm just so grateful for it because it was a real learning experience for me. Like what I'm not going to tolerate. Also, you're not as slick as you think you are. And I also acknowledge the fact that I played in that, you know, when that kind of bubbled to the surface and was brought to my attention, I didn't handle it the best either. And it bubbled to the surface in a very ugly face-to-face way, very publicly. Was not an experience that I had ever had before, you know, and I do regret and would love to go back and change some of the things that were said in that exchange. But the sentiment of what I said ultimately was how I felt, which was all I'd ever ask of any partner is just be upfront, be straight with me, keep it 100. And if you really feel the need to like go behind my back, be sneaking around, doing some funny stuff, then why are we talking in the first place? Right. So if you're talking to someone, if you're dating, if you're married, any of those things, don't try to be slick. You know, that stuff shouldn't fly. And we're also in 2024.
Yeah.
People got cameras and iPhones and all kinds of stuff. Like, if you think you're slick, that's your first problem.
Yeah, you're not.
You're not. You're not.
Well, sadly, we all have to kind of go through those terrible situationships, and we usually both do something wrong, but in the end, it makes us better. Mm-hmm. Are there any last words of wisdom, advice, mottos you'd like to give out to the crowd?
Oof. These are good endings. I like this.
It's fun, right? Got to keep it light.
It's great. No, just thanks for having me. And I will give one kind of final shout. Again, I've probably referenced TikTok 40,000 times already this pod. One of my favorite creators. It is a great app and another way to hide the loneliness. I'll give a shout out one of my favorite creators. He's a little bit of an older guy. His name's Tim Chuisano. He's a pretty senior marketing executive at a company in New York. He makes fantastic content. If you guys ever are interested, check him out. I think it's TIMMCHIUSANO. And he always talks about this concept of becoming addicted to appreciation. And if I were to leave with any kind of parting words, 2024, things I want to do more is become addicted to appreciation. for everything in my life. The ability to walk, the ability to spend time with people, something as simple as being able to go up to the fridge, put my hydro flask under it, and get ice and water out of it at one go. Just really practicing addiction to appreciation this year.
Wow. We love hyping other people up.
Gotta show props. Gotta show props.
Do you want to give your Instagram handle?
Yeah, it's the only Topher, Topher. So think Christopher and just remove the Chris part out of it. Yeah, the only Topher on Instagram.
Well, thank you, CJ, for coming on today.
Thanks for having
Hopefully
me.
we can have you back, maybe next time with Drea.
Ooh, would
Do
love that.
A little podcast threesome.
Would love it.
And I'm sure that would be an interesting episode. I just got to get another microphone here. But thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
And I'll see you guys next week.
Later, y'all.